Dublin, Ohio, a modern city thriving in the heart of the Buckeye State. It's a city on the grow, with a population well over 20,000, a strong business base, excellent school system, great neighborhoods, and plenty of recreational opportunities and activities. But as with all places great and small, Dublin's real richness lies with its people. Men and women who, over the years, lived their days both memorable and mundane, and continue to breathe life into the lore that lingers still today. For a handful of folks who have dwelt in and around Dublin most of their lives, the tales of their time share stories beyond the basics of a simple history lesson. As they speak from their souls, you'll hear them with your heart. These are the reflections of Dublin.
Well, Dublin actually was a farming community.
There was 12 or 14 active farmers with 75 to 150 acres of land.
My dad ran a thrashing machine, and he also ran a ensilage to put up in the silos.
I grew up on the farm. We had cows, horses, sheep, hogs, did our own farming, fed our own cattle, milked every day, morning and night.
You see, there was just Lower Street and this street, and this was a pasture field back here.
Everybody had little gardens. Everybody had some kind of animals, a cow or a chicken, even though it was right within the city.
My earliest recollection is when the WPA put the curbs and gutters in on High Street.
Dublin is noted for the rocks. I mean, you can dig down here about 12 inches and you're into rock.
You go around Dublin, you see a lot of the old stone fences because the rock was right on surface.
This was part of the Virginia military grant. There was no money to pay the Revolutionary Soldiers after the war. And George Washington and the Continental Congress then decided, well, let's just give them some free lands.
John Shields was surveying the lots, and he asked, the surveyor was Irish, and he said, what name would you like to make? He said, well, I'd like to call it after my old hometown, Dublin, in Ireland. And that was the way Dublin got its name.
The only thing Irish is to the name Dublin, and I would guess today we would still have mostly German.
In the north edge was where the library is now, which was the old schoolhouse, and just above that Indian Run. And the east edge was the river, and the south edge was just here below the car barn, and the west end was the church and the cemetery and the schools.
It was a pretty rough town in between the 1880s and 1890s. It was extremely difficult for somebody that wasn't a Dublinite to get safely through town without getting involved in some altercation.
Back in the 30s, this town was really unique. A lot of good character people, and everybody was poor in this town.
There was a spring up by the bridge, and you'd go down there and get fresh water. You had two town pumps, one in the south and one in the north. You carried your drinking water, and water for laundry and all that was collected from the roofs in a cistern.
And at one time there were 68 outhouses. There's only 3 left in Dublin. Of course, Betty Weber had the best outhouse because it had hollyhocks around it in the summertime to really beautify this outbuilding, And even today, Betty has a lot of fond memories about that outhouse.
Hollyhocks. I hate hollyhocks to this day.
There was no bridge at Hayden Run. So we would either go up what is now Riverside Drive and then over to a ford just north of where the Hayden Run Bridge is now.
They had a flood.
Cyclone was 12 and the flood in 13.
And we could stand on that old iron bridge and see the animals go down the river.
I was born in 1912. I was 8 weeks old. The cyclone hit June the 15th and completely demolished 2 churches here in Dublin. And from there on, the good people decided it was the reason why we only had 1 church, so they combined and formed 1.
Well, my grandfather came from Kippenheim, Germany, and they came to Columbus, lived on Rich Street for a while. And then he moved out to Dublin. And then, as he was able to, he bought a farm back Penny Road. He built the farm up to 165 acres. They had 11 children, 8 boys and 3 girls.
I was born up here where the firehouse is. We moved down here when I was 5 years old, and I've been here ever since. A man by the name of Graham built it. He sold it to my grandfather. And my grandfather raised 9 children in this house.
My grandfather bought the farm here, about 90 acres of land in 1876. There was an old house on this same foundation. He replaced that, as you see now.
In the old farmhouse, the upstairs at one time had been a dance hall. So it was just a big open room, and we had 3 or 4 beds up there. And you didn't have your own room. You had a drawer.
My father was born in this house in 1880 and died in 1960. He never moved.
The house was big. The bedroom was 21, 22 foot long.
11 foot wide. It was a beautiful old house.
But I was born in Columbus, came back to Dublin, and then we lived in a little 2-room apartment that was on the side where Biddy's is now.
I'm still mowing the same yard now that I mowed when I was a kid, 7 years old or so.
One thing we had in the brick house was a cherry stairway, open stairway. We had more fun sliding down that banister.
Those candlesticks that she has there is made from the banister.
My grandparents built a cabin up north of Dublin, and I moved in there with them.
My father was Jacob Lepper. As a young man, he worked around at different jobs as they did then, whatever they could get. Started going with my mother, Gay Bauer, at Linworth. They married, and he started farming down on E.W. Tuller's share of rent.
My mother was a seamstress, and she sewed for people, and she made all my dad's shirts.
We was disciplined, I tell you. We had to walk the straight and narrow path.
Well, Dad was very, very strong.
We did, even in high school, they wouldn't let us play cards, you know.
And my dad would husk corn for the farmers, and they couldn't pay him, so he'd take a cow or a pig or anything, and he would butcher back here in the garden.
She decided she wanted my cousin, Walter J. Leppert, to marry us. He was a Methodist minister out in Upper Darby, Philadelphia.
His name was Alvy Richards, and he lived over in Old Tansy Road, and I met him at a dance. We went together about 3 years, and then we got married.
That's where I met my wife. She was singing in the choir, and I'd sit in the second row and flirt with her.
We were kids that had special things we had to do, special jobs. And I know my job was to get kindling and cobs in to light the cooks out.
Well, my brother chopped wood and got the coal and kindling in. And my oldest sister, she had to take care of this room and this room. My other sister and I would take care of the middle room and the kitchen. And my mother did the cooking, and my other sister and I did the dishes.
We had to work. I mean,
we were busy
plowed
all the time, and at night
corn.
we studied.
We plowed corn. We did pick potato bugs, and we did everything.
My mother made butter, and she'd make two loaves, and I would sell one, you know, because they had a hard time getting money.
Grocery stores, actually 2 stores. When we first came here, it was run by Dora Krause and her husband, and then there was another one down the street that run by Leor Cole.
His store was named the Red and White Grocery Store, and That was a hangout for kids.
Leor Cole invented rainbow ice cream because he would scrape the bottom of every ice cream can and mix it together, and then he had rainbow ice cream.
He had the first gambling casino in Dublin. They put a slot machine in there back, I don't know, had to be in the 40s.
Harold Shriver and his wife had an appliance store and a confectionery and so on. And I remember when televisions first came out that he would move the television out in front of the window so he could stand, so the kids could stand out on the street and, you know, watch Hopalong Cassidy and the Lone Ranger and all these all these shows.
These people, we set up prices. They had the store up where Domino's is now.
They had everything in that store, I'm telling you. There wasn't nothing they didn't have.
We never felt lack or need of anything. No one ever had any money, but we really didn't need it. No one else did either, and we always had plenty to eat.
But we had gardens, and we had plenty of fresh vegetables in the summer, and we canned. Everybody canned tomatoes and peaches, and you put applesauce up.
I was born in 1929 and got to experience this town, about 150 people, about 20 dogs maybe. Everybody knew each other, everybody knew the dogs, and we just had a great time here growing up.
We would gather around each other's house in the evening, and we'd sing and we'd make taffy and pull it.
Dad would get a ticket to the Lyceum courts at school, and there would be a violinist come one time, or maybe a magic guy the next time.
We went to what they called back then socials, to sort of a picnic type of thing.
The girls would fix a box of food and take it to the entertainment or the social. They called it a social. And then the boys would buy the box.
In the fall, we'd break up the leaves and have bonfires out here in the front and roast wieners.
Saturday night was a big night. Everybody went into Dublin to get their groceries, socialize.
What we did, though, was walk up one side of the street, a whole bunch of us, and down on the other side. That was all there was to do.
They had this medicine show out here, and they said that they would give a ruby ring to the most popular girl in Dublin, and I won it.
They would sell remedies that would cure everything. And then they would have skits, too.
We had free picture shows.
Medicine
and we had them right at the end of the street. Everybody would bring their chairs and their blankets, and they'd have pictures.
Socials, they had street fairs and carnivals and church sales and things.
Well, you'd go to the county fair. That was a big deal.
Went to the drive-in movies. There was a drive-in theater across the, just on the other side of the river there.
In high school, big activity was square dancing.
Just as you turned to go down Riverside Drive was the Dublin nightclub.
It's sat where the Wendy's restaurant is at the corner of 161 and 33 over there by the bridge. A lot of social organizations would hold their banquets and dinners and things in there. And it was just like you walk in there and you knew everyone.
For fun, we went to the Rock, which was down at the river, and that's where we all learned to swim.
Everybody that ever grew up around Dublin used that one time or another for a swimming hole, or they used it for a bathhouse.
I think all of us at that time were considered to be river rats. We spent numerous hours in the river, on the river.
I swam at the Old Rock many times.
It was about 4 or 5 feet deep in front, so you could dive in if you were careful.
Everybody went down there, and you either got thrown in off the Old Rock, or you learned how to swim or you drowned, and fortunately nobody drowned.
It was always private, but every once in a while you'd see people standing on the bridge hollering at you.
When we were kids all growing up in the summertime, that was our second home.
They would also, in the wintertime, skate down there by the Old Rock because the river would freeze over.
We used to go ice skating up on north of the bridge in the wintertime.
Sledding in the wintertime, numerous hills from to go down.
The alley's right beside Biddy's, and if you had a sled, the snow was great. You could start at the top of that hill, go down to the spring, clear to the river.
I always slid with somebody and either set up or go belly buster. And it was fun.
And Ethel Wirtz's hill was the best one, and it was up in the north end of Dublin, right where the old school building used to be, where the Dublin Public Library is at now. And you could slide all the way from the top of the hill clear down the river, and that was one of the big thrills for kids in the wintertime.
Dad had graduated up here. He went clear through Dublin School, but he graduated in 1899.
There was one building, one school, 12 grades in the same building.
In 1915, they decided to centralize the schools. So the building was built, the one they call the 1919 building up here.
We marched up to the new school building. Oh, that was a great day. I'll never forget that day.
I graduated in 1923. And all these country schools came to Dublin, and that's the first time they had school buses.
I liked the music, and that's about all. I hated arithmetic. I couldn't hardly add 1 and 1. I hated it so bad. And history, I didn't care anything about. What I liked was today.
Every Friday, we'd have a spelling bee and choose sides and spell, see who could stand up the longest.
Spent a lot of time in the school activities, band practice or choir practice. There's always something to do at school at night.
First football team in Dublin was 1947. My brother Jerry was one of the first football players.
Frankly, I couldn't wait for school to start. I wasn't much of a farmer, and I didn't see any of my friends until school started.
When I graduated in 1951, I graduated in the largest class that ever graduated from Dublin. That was 27 people.
When I graduated from high school, I was going to be a teacher. And so I went to office training school. In 2 years, I got my teaching certificate. My first school was in Tuscarawas County, and I was over there 5 years. Well, then I got married, and I stayed at home for about 12 years. Then they wanted me to come to Dublin and be clerk treasurer of the school. So that's what I did, and I was up there 24 years. I suppose that's the reason the school was named for me. I don't know.
I spent about 8 years on the school board. We built this school. It was exciting. We never thought there would have to be 2 more, maybe.
The Board of Education had a group from Ohio State University come up and talk to them about where to build another school. And they said, well, of all places, don't ever go out on Kaufman Road. That's where the Board of Education put the school building.
We only had, I think, $16 or $17 million tax valuation. And so we had to get a special bond issue passed. And we were successful in doing that, and people thought we were nuts to think of buying 50 acres at $3,000 an acre.
You know, the school system's probably one of the better school systems in the state of Ohio.
They had a lot of good people.
We had good neighbors. Nell Tuller lived north of me, and she was a school teacher. And then on the south side of me was Mrs. Davis, and her husband worked at the courthouse in Columbus.
There was an old stone house up in the north part of town where Bert Wing lived, and it was the site of the first telephone exchange. Bert Wing's wife.
There was Geraldine Wing. Her desk was right in the front window, and of course they were all party lines.
Chai's grandmother was a German lady, and so she could tell when other people were on the party line. So when she knew someone was on the line, she started talking German to her family so no one could tell what she was saying.
You know, great people. There was a guy by the name of Jack Ray who was a barber, and I can really remember even today getting my hair cut there.
They always said you could get a haircut and a trip around the world for 25 cents in Jack Ray's barbershop. I don't know whether Jack ever got out of Dublin, but we seem to think that he knew a lot about what was going on in the world.
Well, we were neighbors of Heidi Kaufman, and I had some apple trees and along the driveway. And The apples that particular year seemed to be extra good, so Betty suggested that I take some over to Heidi, that she might like to make some applesauce or pies. And at that time, she was 96, I believe. I came back laughing and told Betty that Heidi had said, she thanked me for the apples. And I said, Betty thought maybe make some applesauce. She says, well, I'm not going to eat them all. She says, I'll put them in the freezer for next year. And I said, now that's optimism.
Another one was Lick Arts, and Lick lived in the house called the Brazen Head Pub. He was another one that was a real supporter of the athletic program.
John Snoffer built this street out here. He furnished the stone, and the men in the quarry come up here and worked on the road. And we would sit out there on the porch and flirt with them. Yeah, don't put that in.
Standing here in front of the car barn, Carly Carr, as we always called him when we were growing up as kids, was a real lover of children, and he had horses, and all the kids in Dublin really enjoyed, seeing the horses, and he'd take you a ride on it.
Ethel Arts, who lived on the corner where they just tearing down the filling station, we thought she was a witch, really.
We were always kind of afraid of Ethel. She kind of mean to kids. Ethel was one of the characters of Dublin.
Henry Carr was part of that clan of Carrs, and he was a medical doctor who devoted all his life to servicing the people in Dublin and the area.
I want to tell you about Sam Davis. He had the grocery store up here. He had the most beautiful voice. He sang in the church choir, and he sang at school. He would go up and down the street singing and whistling.
Harold Shriver, Mose Mars, Walter Daniels, and Dick's dad. These guys developed a kind of a business-type atmosphere around Dublin. We used to have street fairs, and we had the Dublin Sesquicentennial back in 1960. And these guys were all instrumental in bringing together the community.
The original owner of the property in this area was Benjamin Sells, who was one of the sons of Ludwig Sells, the settlers of this area. Fletcher Kaufman's wife, Miranda Hayes, and her sister inherited this property here. The house here is fully restored to what it looked like when the Kaufmans moved in 1867. Everything in this house either belonged to the Kaufmans or belonged to some family that was in the early stages of Dublin. The carpeting that you see on the floor and the wall covering are exact replicas of what was in this room when the Fletcher and Miranda moved in. Basically, Kaufman Road was nothing more than a lane into the Kaufman house at this end and a lane into the farm area at the Bauer farm up there. I think it was 1927, according to records, when they extended the road clear through.
Kaufman Road was a gravel road. The bridge was an old plank bridge. And when an implement or a car or something went over, they would rattle.
And then up at the other end, it's called the Asher Brand House. Asher Brand was a Presbyterian minister out of Worthington many, many years ago. But at that time, Frank Bauer owned it.
France Road, when we first moved here, was a mud road. Had Frank Thomas and Arnold Brown spread the gravel. And my father and another teamster hauled Christ stone from Arts's quarry, north part of Old Dublin. And it cost him $500 without his labor in it.
Metro Place was originally, I believe, part of the old France farm. There was a road that ran back up about in where Metro is. It was called Leopard Road, just a little gravel, two-lane rutted road. Sam France had a big farm at the corner of Rings and France Road for years and years and years. That's where the field of corn is now.
The barn in our background, as Jim said earlier, is one of the oldest unchanged things that we've got left in town.
This area here was actually used as a pasture for the cows, and then behind the house and on to the west That was all farming land.
For years, there was a place, what they called it, the Dublin Gun Club, that sat up on the hill there about where, probably where Wendy's is.
Years ago, it was a hotel, but George Pelton bought it, and he raised 10 kids in that house over there.
There was 2 Dot's boys. They lived on the east end of Tuttle, and then about halfway on Rings Road to the west, we had the Hearth Farm, and then the Price brothers, they had a little dairy farm out on the other end of it before you got to Cosbury there. Murfield was basically that entire area in there was pasture land because of the hilly terrain and so on, and extensive tree growth, that it was never really cleared for farming. I think J.L. Wiseman was the gentleman's name that owned the biggest part of that property up in there at that time.
I used to hunt fox in that area.
It didn't change for quite a few years, but then once it started, why, it has developed quite a bit now since we've been here.
When Muirfield started out here,
I think that was the beginning.
They thought that
of it.
was really something because it was going to make more money for the schools, and everybody be better off.
I love Murfield. It's nice up there.
It's a boost for Dublin.
Until the middle 70s, when Jack Nicklaus built a golf course and an outer belt went around Columbus, we were kind of a small town of about 700 at that time, and now today here we're probably touching 20,000 people in Dublin.
I don't know anything about golf, but I like Jack. He's nice.
People wanted Dublin to stay as it was, but with 270, the decision was made for us. It wasn't a question if, it was a question when.
I was on council since 1963 and then mayor in 78. I saw it develop.
And they've got a great mix of business and homes in Dublin now, and I think that's, for those people that were in charge back in those times, really did a good job of kind of watching Dublin grow.
I was mayor when Wendy's built their headquarters here. I dedicated Kroger's store, cut the ribbon for that.
Franklin Street down here was kind of the first addition and was built right after the war.
There's something like 45 major headquarters in Dublin now. I understand that there's about 43,000 people work in Dublin every day.
I really like Dublin. I think Dublin is a good place to live.
I feel I've had a great life growing up in this little town.
I've never wished I lived anyplace else.
We've traveled the world. Not many areas of the world we haven't been, and it's great, but our roots are here, and this is a nice place to call home.
This is a great town. The people in this town really nice.
We have friends that we've had that we started first grade with, and that just doesn't happen anymore, not even to our children.
I just hope that the city of Dublin just keeps doing the good things, and I'm sure that's going to happen.
Oh, it was wonderful. I had lots of friends, and I wouldn't want to live any place else but Dublin.
I'd like to see High Street in Dublin pretty much stay the same.
I'm glad that my children grew up here and went through school here. I hope that other people will get as much out of Dublin as me and my family have as we've lived here.
I love Dublin because this is my home. And when I die, I'm going to be buried up here, right up here. And so when I come back, I can come down here and see what's going on.